Good morning. Yeah, boy. Judas. Anybody ever used to watch Andy Griffith? Yeah, remember Goober's impersonation? Judy, Judy, Judy. Yeah. Judas, Judas, Judas. You know what? When we come to Judasville and see the sign for the bypass, we always take it. We always want to skirt around this guy because we don't really want to deal with. I mean, the death of Christ is dark enough. Why do we need more darkness? And yet this guy is really a key player. He's one of the 12. So this morning we're going to dig into him, and this has bothered me all week. Ask my wife. This has really troubled me all week because I thought, I don't want to talk about this. That's not where I want to go. But I think there's some of the deepest hurts that we Bethany and I were talking before church tonight. I'm grieving for Wayne. She's grieving for Megan. We're still doing that, y'all. Let's just own that as a church. We still grieve the deaths of these two people we love so deeply. And when dark stuff happens, when painful stuff happens, God help us. We don't want to come out the other end and just say, well, I survived that. Is that the best we can do? With grace involved, with God involved, with, is that the best is that what we're shooting for? I survived. Hopefully we learn and our faith and trust goes deeper and our understanding goes deeper. So I'm trying to figure out where we're going to go with Judas. So let's just kind of unpack this a little bit. First of all, he was one of the 12, right? I mean, there wasn't the 11 and then Judas. He was one of the 12. Jesus called him just like he called everybody else. And in the lists, by the way, he's always last in all the Gospels, but in the list of disciples, he's always in the list. He's always there. So he got the same call. He got the same, he knew what Jesus liked in his coffee in the morning. He knew what the secret handshake was. He was privy to all the little campfire talks they had. And, he knew all the favorite places to go. And he'd been to Mary and Martha and Lazarus' house just along with the rest of them. He was part of the posse, part of the crew. Even to take a little deeper, he had felt the fish and the bread multiply in his hands twice. I mean, I'd like to do that. He'd felt that. He had been sent out 2 by 2. Don't know who he was paired with. But he'd been sent out 2 by 2 and literally cast out demons and preached the good news, preached the gospel, and had seen some results. Came back to Jesus and reported. He was in the boat that night when the storm came and Jesus was cutting Z's and they were all upset. Don't you care that we perish? And they woke him up. Jesus calmed the storm. So he's part of that. And when we come to what we're going to receive communion here this morning, when we come to the Last Supper, I want to double, triple check this just to make sure. He received the bread and the wine, and Jesus washed his feet. So Jesus made no difference between the other 11 and him. He loved on him. He pursued him. He embraced him. He included him just like he did the other 11 from stem to stern all the way. So he's one of the 12. And out of the 12, if we're sitting there at that supper that Carla read about, and Jesus said, one of you is going to betray me. If we're sitting there, we might predict or might guess it would be somebody besides Judas. Peter's a little flaky every now and then. On a bad day, it's possible. I mean, he did deny him. It's possible he might betray him on a really bad day. Thomas, is this guy that says, I insist on certainty. I want my questions answered. I want proof. And he could have easily said, I still got too many questions unanswered. You've not answered my question. I'm turning you in to the temple police. It could have been Matthew. This dude here, albeit, we know that Jesus changed him, but he's got a long track record of sleight of hand at the tax booth where he slipped a little in his back pocket. And if he had a chance to make, some change, he knew how to do that sleight of hand. So, we might have guessed one of these guys, but Judas is this kind of anonymous disciple, we probably wouldn't have picked him. I don't know that I would have predicted that he would have been the guy to do this. So, 2 times during what I'm going to say to you this morning, we're going to kind of pick him apart a little bit. The first is, let's just look at the biblical things in the big story of the 4 Gospels, what we know about Judas, and then later we're going to do a little personality profile of him, or try to anyway. So we know that the only time he ever spoke up, the only time he ever got vocal, was that time that the expensive perfume was used to anoint Jesus' feet, and Judas spoke up and said, that money could have been used to go feed the poor. That's the only time he ever spoke up. When there was a money issue, he spoke up. John tells us that he was the treasurer, and then quickly follows up and says, and he's a thief. So John wasn't a big fan of Judas. He and Luke both suggest there was satanic influence with Judas. I'm doing my Rolodex here in my brain. I found out, it's not in Scripture, but I found out that Judas most likely was from the southern part of the country, which in that culture, in that country, the northern people were like more of the blue-collar, hardworking. The southern people were more the elite people. So he might have come into the 12 thinking he was maybe a notch or 2 better or more qualified. I don't know. That's a stretch, but it might help later on when we do the profile. Like I said before, in the list of the 12, he always comes last. Jesus at one point called him the devil, and he also said he was a son of perdition, which I looked that up because I didn't know what that meant. And perdition means to be lost or destroyed. So he's kind of a hopeless character, kind of a sad character. So here we know about Judas from the evidence that we get from the big story, the Gospels. Kind of quiet. He wasn't verbose like Peter and the sons of thunder and all. We'll look at that later. So you get down to the question of, okay, in the Old Testament, when the children of Israel were held captive in Egypt, for that story to work, you kind of needed a villain, didn't you? Kind of, at least at the outset. And so Pharaoh signed up for that. I'll be the villain. So over and over, he's hard-hearted, mean, vengeful, all this stuff. So he's the obvious villain in that story. You get to the Christmas story, and we've got the shepherds. Oh, they're hobbits. I love them. You got the wise men. They got hairy little feet. They're hobbits. I know they do. You got the wise men on their camels. You've got Mary and Joseph. You've got, all these prophecies early in the book of Luke. You got Simeon and all these people. And then you got Herod. So, okay, to make the story work, I don't know, do you need a villain? So to make this Easter story work, Passion Week story, do you have to have was he just the essential villain to make the story work? I'm going to ask a lot of questions here, and I don't really have the answers. Was he fated? I used to read this almost as if he was fated to do this. He had no choice in it. That God put his finger on him and said, no, you're going to do this. You have no choice in the matter. That doesn't work for me anymore. I can't wrap my head around that. Was he possessed of darkness and evil? When did the notions to resist Jesus? Oh, by the way, the theme of today's message is supposed to be resistance. Totally forgot that. So there you go, halfway through. So where did it dawn on him to resist Jesus? Where did it dawn on him to resist him? When did those little thoughts start? Right there at the end, and they've been kind of whispering in his ear as he moved along. I don't know. So, like a lot of questions. And so I think it would be good for us to take 2 or 3 steps back and look at the great big story, not just the big story from the Gospels, but the great big story in Scripture, and go all the way back to creation. This answers a few questions. Anyway, prior to creation, if I understand it correctly, there was God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit in the Holy Trinity, and they had absolute perfect unity, never an argument, always love, always compassion, always kindness, always patience, all the good stuff, joy, peace, everything. They had that in spades. It was just, and it was, for all eternity. It always been that way. And the love was so big and so strong that they had this crazy committee meeting and said, let's make people who will rebel against us, which is literally what happened. They made humanity. And we just barely got here, and we decided we could do better than the design. We could be more than what we were. And so we had the little fruit thing that happened. And immediately you have shame and blame. You have hypocrisy. You have kids that kill each other. Instantly. This resistance to God's love. God showed up every day just to love on them. That's all he wanted. He wasn't a policeman checking up on them. He was a father who said, let's just walk and talk. Have a good time. And they said, no, that's not good enough. And so they resisted that love, that pure, perfect daddy's love. They resisted it for whatever, for their own reasons. So you have to, and I used to kind of think, I used to wonder, did this blindside God or did he see it coming? And I think I fully believe that God fully saw the fruit incident before he ever created humanity. He saw it coming. And he created Eve anyway. Created Adam and Eve anyway. Created us anyway. And I think the same would hold true with Judas, right? That he saw the betrayal and he created him anyway. So evidently God is not put off by or afraid of resistance. Oh no, what do we do? He's not blindsided by it. He's not put off by it. He's not afraid of it. It's like he pushes into it with love. He just keeps traveling, pushing into it with love. So resistance doesn't put God off or scare him or anything like that. And then you have to philosophically start to define, if love is going to be love, we have to retain the choice of resisting it, right? Because if we can't resist it, it's not love anymore. It's some sort of compulsion, it is fate. And we don't have any choice in the matter anymore. So if we're going to truly have this love relationship with God, we have to have the free choice to embrace it or to resist it. If it's going to be love, that has to be the case. By definition, has to be. And if it's going to be love, the way I understand love, at least from the big story, at least when I look at God, if it's going to be love, it's going to love regardless of the response or the resistance or the reaction to it. So, God had the same feeling of love toward Judas the moment he was born all the way until the very end. His feelings toward Judas never changed. Not one iota the whole time. If love is what it's portrayed to be in Scripture. So, let's talk about this resistance thing. If I resist kindness, I become mean. If I resist joy, I become grumpy. If I resist generosity, I become greedy. See where we're going with this? When I resist one, I kind of, by nature, embrace the other. But if I resist love, if I resist somebody trying to love me, which is what Judas did, if I resist that, then I betray the one who is trying to love me. And in Judas' case, he betrayed the posse of 11 around him. But worse than that, he betrayed himself. Because the human heart was designed to be loved and to love. And so he betrayed Jesus, the posse, and himself. Now I want to know why. Who does that? Who does that? So I did what I never do. Maybe you don't do this 5 times a day. I never do this. I thought, I'm going to Google. I'm old. If you noticed, I never have any slides up there. I don't even know what to do with slides up there. I'd probably want to turn around and look at them myself. I don't know. But I Googled. I can kind of use a smartphone. Anyway, so I Googled. You were supposed to be impressed, but that didn't do anything. So I Googled personality profile of Judas. And I thought, you know what I'm thinking I'm going to get? I'm going to get a bunch of theologians, seminary professors, who are going to pontificate upon the good and the evil of Judas. That's going to be my personality profile. Lo and behold, there were several people who actually ran him through the Enneagram thing. You know, I don't understand Enneagram stuff. We did Myers-Briggs when I was young. That was how we found out what our personality was. But y'all know all about this Enneagram thing. And so they assigned, you told me it was a number card, right? Okay, so they assigned this number to him, and then they proceeded to explain what this number, the characteristics of this number. And immediately I thought, no, I don't agree with that at all. This is not the way I read Judas. They had him as a pushy, overbearing, domineering type guy. And I think, no, he only spoke up. He wasn't like Peter, you know. I'll walk on the water. Oh, I know who you are. You're the Messiah. He wasn't Peter. He wasn't Thomas, who was, I don't get it, so you better explain it. He wasn't like the sons of thunder. He wasn't. The only time he spoke up when it came to a money issue. So I'm thinking that Judas was more of a quiet type, which leads me to think of some other things. Now, here's where I'm using my imagination. All right? This is not a thus saith the Lord. This is Wendell's gone down a rabbit trail, is what he's done. So I got to thinking about just little pieces of evidence we have with Judas. And I thought, okay, to start with, one guarantee we know, whether it's written or not, he was wounded when he was little, because none of us come out of our childhood unscathed. Sorry, we don't. Sorry. It's a fact of life. I don't care how perfect your parents are, nobody comes out of childhood unscathed. If we had time, I'd give you some biblical backup for that. So Judas is hurting. He's wounded. And like all the rest of us, he doesn't like to hurt. Who likes to hurt? So he's going to figure out some way to salve his pain or to medicate his pain. And so whereas Peter was addicted to approval and attention, and Thomas was addicted to certainty, that's how I feel safe. That's how I feel secure. I think Judas was an isolator. He's a cave dweller, his own personal little cave, and there he could guard his safety and his significance. And, we're connecting dots that should be connected. But how did he wind up treasurer of this bunch? Who was the money person in the crew? Matthew's the money person. He knew how to balance a budget. He knew how to manage money better than any of them. And somehow Judas parlayed his way, did something to become the money manager. So, on a hungry day, it's like, hey guys, where are we going to eat today? Mickey D's or Cheddar's? Well, ask him. So you look at Judas, he jingles the purse strings, gives a peek. Sorry guys, we have to go to Mickey D's, can't go to Cheddar's. He's got control. He's got subtle control over the group because he controls the money. And feels it incumbent upon himself to make a statement about the waste of money. That money could have been used to. So the guy has figured out a way to take care of himself. He's figured out a way to guard that which is important to him. His safety, his significance, his idea of I'll control, but I'll do it in camouflage. I won't do it out front like Peter. I'll do it covertly. And so he's got this system that he worked his whole life and became one of the 12 and said, I'll even up that and I'll even shore up my defenses a little bit. And the whole time, all Jesus is wanting to do with this guy is love him. I want to love you. I want to wash your feet. I want to invite you to follow me. I want you to be part of the miracles that I do. I just want to love you. That's all I want to do. And every time Judas says, no, thank you, I've got what I want. I'm satisfied in my isolation, in my cave. And so at some point, he had all he could take. He's had all he could take and said, I'm not taking this anymore. This voice that I keep hearing, this heart that keeps trying to pull me over to it, has to be eliminated. So he sold him out. And so my whole life, I always assumed that Judas betrayed Jesus for theological reasons. You are not teaching the Old Testament like I think it should be taught. Or he sold him out for political reasons. You know, you should have turned the Romans into toads. We should be champions here. And you didn't do that. I always thought that's why he betrayed Jesus. I think he betrayed Jesus because he was resistant to his love. I can't take you trying to love on me anymore. I won't stand for it anymore. So I'll just eliminate you. So we have two deaths this weekend. We have the death of Jesus and we have the death of Judas. And of course, Jesus' death, we know how that turns out. He busts out of the tomb. We say, okay, we get the point of that death. You look at Judas' death, you know, some say he disemboweled himself out on the potter's field. Others say he hung himself. Whatever. You look at his life and his death and you ask, what's the point? What's the point? We get the point of Jesus' death. We don't get the point of Judas' death. And so I've scratched my head. I'm already going bald. I'm nearly bald trying to figure out what is the point? Why? And so I came up with a few things that might be helpful. I don't know. One is that you don't wake up a betrayer overnight. To become a betrayer is not one like big leap. It consists of lots of little steps. And to resist love to that point, to sell out somebody like that, is the result of lots of little steps of resistance, not one big step. The second thing I think we learn from this story is that Jesus doesn't call us because we're good. He calls us so that we have a chance to respond to his love. There's a big difference. And the third thing is we never get good or practiced or professional at resisting love. If I do this long enough, I'll get good at it. If I do this long enough, it'll get easier. If I do this long enough, it'll become instinct. I don't want to think about it anymore. No. When we resist love, especially pure love, like Jesus' love, we get more frustrated. We get more frantic. We get more, it goes darker and darker and darker. And we wind up, okay, you talk about hobbits, we wind up as a hobbit who becomes a Gollum in The Lord of the Rings, who lives in the caves and can just think about his precious that he doesn't have. So if we're resisting love today, there is no good end to that. It doesn't end pretty. If you think you're unlovable, sorry you are. And if you think he can love everybody else in this room, but he can't love me, sorry, you're wrong. And if I resist his love long enough, it'll get easier. Sorry, that doesn't work that way. So we have a choice to just buckle under and just say, okay, God, love me. Just go ahead. I give up. I give up. Just love me. And we can see what happens then.